All right, we'll be starting in 2 minutes, everyone. All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. My name is David Skenazi, and this is Mirya Kuluwind, and we are Internet Architecture enthusiasts, and welcome to Iabopen. Next slide, please. So this meeting, like many of the ones you've been at and you will be this week, is covered by the Note Well. In particular, you've agreed to the Note Well when you registered for this session. Some of you might have read it. Most of you probably didn't read the whole thing. Just want to point out that anything said here or on the list or in the chat or on GitHub or any related to IETF is considered an IETF contribution and triggers some legal responsibilities in terms of disclosing patents, for example, that you know about. I generally don't think there are that many patents when we're talking about policy things, but who knows? Just be aware of such things. Additionally, the IETF Note Well covers our code of conduct and our anti-harassment policy. Just those are incredibly important. This meeting has always been pleasant, and I just want to make sure we keep it that way. So yeah, let's be happy, everyone, be nice. These are our usual meeting tips. Please make sure to join the session on MeetEcho, even if you are here in person. That way we have a count of attendance. So you can either join the full MeetEcho client on your laptop or the light client on your phone. Both of them fill out the blue sheets and allow you to raise your hand if you want to talk at the microphone. So we're using the MeetEcho queue for questions, comments, long speeches. So just make sure that you join that and then walk up to the microphone. So when we call on you, you're already there and you can talk. Additionally, I want to remind everyone of the IETF mask policy, not the working group, the thing that prevents the spread of COVID. Everyone is required to wear masks during session with exceptions of people on the podium here while they are actively speaking, because we're far from all of you. So please keep your mask on while you're sitting and also while you're asking questions at this microphone over there. Okay, and remote participants, please stay muted and camera off unless you're speaking. And then when you're speaking, we do recommend turning your camera on. That way we can see how good you look. And if you don't want to, that's totally optional. All right, next slide, please. So what is Iabopen? Why are we here? Did we walk into the wrong room? It's kind of a session for the Internet Architecture Board, the IAB, to share what we're up to and to give the community an opportunity to all find out and also comment and give us feedback. Because at the end of the day, we're not just some crazy people in an ivory tower. We're some crazy people in an ivory tower who listen to you. Okay, next slide. And how should you send us feedbacks, comments, rants, speeches, anything you'd like? In general, we have this mailing list, iab@iab.org, that is the recommended way, and we have more specific ones, such as Architecture Discuss for long discussions, and for liaisons, we have another list. But also feel free to grab any IAB member here in the hallways. We're generally friendly, and you can recognize us by the red dots we have on our badges. Next slide.
Yeah, so this is the boring part of the meeting where we just give a couple of updates so you know what we're doing. We did manage to publish one RFC, and this one is actually an important one. It's the new RFC series editor model. It's done, it's implemented. It's off our plate, so we're not responsible anymore. And like I provide you more information tomorrow in the plenary as well. But then the documents we are actually still responsible for, we have 2 workshop reports. One is in the RFC editor queue already, and the other one is in community feedback. So that's also done. I guess feedback is most useful from people who actually participated in the workshop. But anyway, if you want to read it and provide any comments, we are grateful for that. We have one technical document about recommendations, which we believe is ready for community review. I don't think the call went out yet, but it will very soon. So look out for that. Last chance to comment on this document. The IB thinks it's in good shape and hopefully it's useful to the community. And then we have one more document which is under active discussion, and we know that this document has provoked a lot of discussion. And there will be more time for more discussion in the EDM program meeting, which will be on Thursday. That's the IAB protocol maintenance document. Yeah, and talking about programs.
So a quick update on the electronic dance music or evolvability, deployability, and maintainability of protocols group. We're having an interim meeting. So to a bit of context for folks, the goal of this working group is to think about how we can improve the process of making protocols and documenting them. And so we write documents aimed at this, and we're focusing on one of those documents, which is draft IB protocol maintenance, which talks about when it might be a good idea to use the robustness principle and when it might not be. And so we're having a Thursday morning meeting from 9 to 10 a.m. In the IB office on the floor below. If anyone is interested in that topic, please come and chat. We had some really good discussion on Architecture Discuss, and we're looking to publish this document soon. So we're really encouraging folks to come share opinions. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe one more comment. So this is a small room. It's an open meeting. Everybody is invited to join. But like if you're not actively participating, you might not fit, right? So it would be nice to have those people in the room who actually want to participate. Okay, and we have another technical program, which is the Model T program, or the Internet Threat Model program. And this we reported a couple of times in the Iabopen meeting, and the current status is that there was an interim meeting in April which discussed a little bit about what are the next steps for the program. And since then there wasn't much activity, there was much discussion, there were like a few small document updates, but we're not sure what the way forward is. And so we are actively considering closing this program now. That doesn't mean that like all the problems are resolved, or it doesn't mean that the discussion is ending here, but it means that probably the program doesn't provide the right venue for this discussion anymore. So even if we close the program, discussion can go on the architecture discuss list, or hopefully some of this will actually find its way into the IETF, or maybe there's also room in the IRTF. but the plan is to close the program. So we are still discussing this, but if you have any feedback, you can provide it to us now. I mean, not now, but you can send us an email. You can also provide it now, but I guess that's yeah. Okay. Then, like again, back to the less technical, more administrative side. We just want to mention quickly that we actually created 2 new groups, and this is really kind of for just our internal support of our functions. So maybe not that exciting for you, but just like for some transparency. We have a new group for IETF and IEEE coordination. This is actually not really a new group. This activity always existed. We just like home it now more officially on the data tracker. So hopefully that provides more visibility about the liaison work we're doing there. And this is kind of, it's a closed mailing list, but it's like experts are invited on a need basis. So it's like a moving group of people working on the coordination. And then the other new program is the Iab Ice Policy Coordination group. This is really just to intensify our relationship with ISOC. We have a liaison, we talk to them quite often, and we thought that like having a group that can meet more often and can focus on topics and make sure we don't miss anything important will help us here. So this is brand new, and hopefully it will improve our relationship with ISOC even more. Okay, next is liaison updates. Since last time we added a slide on this because we thought we want to provide a little bit more awareness about liaisons to the community. Not like a huge number of updates this time, but at least there is the RSEC committee, which is in the process of rechartering. So maybe that's information that's interesting for some of you. And then we will have a longer update from Scott, our liaison manager to ITUT this time, to provide a more broader overview of what's happening in this organization. So that's also something new we're doing right now. And we go from, like we start with ITUT this time, and then hopefully the next times we give you some more updates about other organizations. Just in general, to provide more awareness and coordination between the different organizations. Okay, one more part here, and that's the more exciting part. Workshops. We are just sent out a call for a workshop that we're organizing in fall. The workshop is on management techniques in encrypted networks. And we really want to discuss how management can be improved in encrypted networks, and also like how management can be more secure eventually, and actually support user privacy and security. So what we're looking for is contributions about actionable requirements that are needed for network management. So things that like are not only aspirational, but like actually can lead to changes. And we're looking for people who are interested in actually working on this or provide solutions, or just explain solutions that maybe have been provided already. So the call is out there. Please look at the IAB website if there's more text explaining more stuff. And then if you want to participate in this workshop, you have to submit us a position paper by email. And then the workshop is, as always, on invitation. But if you submit a position paper, you have good chances to get invited. But we really want to know what your thoughts are in advance, so we can organize a nice workshop. And then this is a little bit of heads up. We are discussing another workshop on environmental impacts of internet applications and systems. This call isn't out yet, but it's coming very soon. So the IAB already decided that we want to do this. The workshop will happen in December likely. So submission will be a little bit later in October. And we're interested to actually understand what the impact is. What are the right metrics to measure it, and what are the data that we have out there, and like what do we understand if you put everything together. So watch out for this. It's, as I said, the call is not out yet, but we will send it out very soon. Okay. Any questions on these updates? Sorry, we actually, yep.
So I wish it were a question. It's more input to the IAB. I hope you don't close the Model T program. Instead, I hope what the IAB does is inject a little energy into it. IAB has been a little passive about that program. There are 5 drafts. There is community interest. But what we seem to lack there is enough energy to keep the program. What the IAB sees as a symptom is something that I think the IAB could solve by generating some of the energy. The community has contributed some drafts, but we, like you mentioned, we had the one interim meeting. That doesn't seem like enough to me. So my input to the IAB on the Model T program is don't close it. And if the conversation takes place in the IAB about closing it, make sure that you have a place to go for those documents, right? That you've asked the community for input, you've got contributions, and you've closed the program. Please make sure that you have a concrete plan for what to do with the contributions that you've already got. Thanks.
So I well understand that desire, and I understand that it's very not satisfying if we just close the program and there's no follow-up. But what we see is that the purpose of this program, or the purpose of a lot of the IAB activities that we do, is to kind of trigger a conversation in the community, to point the community at gaps or topics that we think we need further discussion. So that's when we created the program, what we wanted to achieve, and we don't see this goal achieved. So we don't know, like, if keeping the program around will achieve this goal. There are documents which have contributed to the discussion, but I think a lot of these documents were not considered as being published on the IAB stream from the beginning. So this might not be the right venue anyway for these documents. We had a discussion today that we needed venue for these documents. And I understand it's very frustrating that I just can't create it for you, but I don't think this venue will be in the IAB. And I can only act in the IAB, I can't act in the other part of the organization. So I think it's actually on you to bring these documents, to keep the discussion going and bring these documents into its right place. And one place we discussed, for example, is also there are some research groups which have a relationship here, like PRG or HRPC. So you might want to approach these chairs in these groups, or you also want to maybe go to the SEC area and keep the discussion going there.
Thanks, Maria. So we see 2 people in the queue that aren't in the virtual queue. We'll allow your questions now, but please, in the future, everyone join the virtual queue. We want to make sure we're fair with the remote participants. And yeah, Yari, since you're the chair, do you want to, of the Model T group, are you responding to the previous point? I mean, if you're responding to the previous point, I think you're welcome to jump the queue.
Yeah, let the queue drain first. I'll
okay, thank you. Sounds good. Go ahead. And you can keep your mask when talking. Just keep the microphone close. It works really well.
Okay, thanks. So just to support what Mike said, but more importantly, for Model
Please state
T,
your name for the minute.
Oh, sorry, Dominique Lizansky. I'm the author of 2 drafts for Model T on threat models and threats. Just to say, I support what Mark said, but also just to say, I think it's not on us particularly, but on us collectively with the IAB as well. The threat model has changed, and my drafts actually show that. And there's quite a lot going on in this area. And I would agree with Mark and his comment on saying that I think it needs support and input and sort of zest, I would say, from the IAB as well as from the community. And I haven't let my drafts expire because there's quite a lot there that's changed and that's going on at the moment. And I just wanted to make that interjection that I would really support seeing this, giving it another chance, and to make sure that we actually have a place to discuss these threats and these threat issues that are coming up. And let's be honest, it's not just about, private sector as well. There's a lot going on right now that we really need to take a look at in terms of threat models.
So this is exactly what we discussed today. It's important to have a place to discuss this with community, but that is not what we're doing in the program. In the program, we are a small group of people discussing it, and we are failing to bring this to the community. So we need a different way to do it, and it might not be an IAB program. Rob.
Rob Wilson, Cisco. So just a quick comment on your workshop on the network management, which I think is great. But when advertising that, you might want to emphasize network monitoring and operations more than network management in a sense, because otherwise you may find that network management itself doesn't get affected by this, and actually it's monitoring the traffic. So just be clear when it's being advertised to pull in the right people and make sure people understand what's coming in.
Hi, I'm Hisham Al-Bakuri. You had a workshop on environmental impact on whatever we do. Does this include energy management and sustainability?
Yari behind you can answer this question.
What?
The person behind you can answer this question.
Oh. The workshop on environmental stuff includes energy management and sustainability.
The workshop environment. Yeah. So the workshop on environmental impacts, it's under preparation. We expect that to be a virtual workshop in December, and so everybody should be easily able to participate. You'll be needing to submit the position paper, and submissions that are interesting from the point of view of the program committee will be accepted, and we'll have a discussion. Yes, it does include energy management and sustainability.
All right, and I'm going to cut the queue after Yari here. Go ahead, Yari.
Yes, I just wanted to come to the mic and say a few words about Model T. So I don't claim that I have all the answers. Like I share the pain that was expressed on the mic previously, but I probably would have used slightly different words than Mirja did. So it's not that necessarily that we're going to close this and go away type of thing. It's more that we see some opportunity for moving some documents at least forward. For instance, some of them as IAB documents, and continuing the discussion on architects to discuss this. So it's at least for some parts, it can be an opportunity for actually completing the work rather than telling people to go away. But there are other parts that we don't necessarily have an answer for. So we need to work on that. And we will be discussing one of the documents, by the way, today later.
Yeah, particularly for documents that we want to move forward in the IAB document, we are looking for recommendations for the community, right? So this is the part that makes most sense on the IAB stream. Scott, I think you have to be very brief because we're already way
Yes,
behind.
I will be as brief as I possibly can and still transfer some information. So greetings, everyone. I'm the Scott Mansfield from Ericsson. I am the ITUT liaison manager between the IETF and the ITUT, and also from the ITUT to the IETF. So I tend to write liaisons to myself quite a lot. So what I've provided here, and this is a presentation that's up on the website, so I'm not going to read every word on this slide. People can read. I just want to point out a few things if there's particular information that you're looking for. And then I'm here all week, so if you need to discuss anything in here a little bit more in depth, just contact me, send me an email. It's scott.mansfield@ericsson.com, very easy. So there are many things that we deal with when we're talking between the ITUT and the IETF. And so there's technical impact things, there's policy impact things, there's geopolitical impact things. So depending on what you're really interested in, take a look at those things and then decide if there's anything that you might want to talk to me about. For instance, the ITUT focus, there's some topics there. They tend, the ITUT, if you don't know, part of the ITU, part of the UN, they like to look at things from the top down. So they always have whatever the latest buzzword is, there's going to be a quantum thing or a digital twin thing or whatever. But what that means to the ITU is different than what that kind of thing means to the IETF. So it's important to keep that in context. So you go to the next slide. So what I provided in here, and there's even more now. There was even a couple more liaisons that came in this morning, even after I sent you this particular version of it. But go to the Liaison Tracker, the online thing, and you can see all of them. You can sort. And so there are several liaisons that we've received. Lots of them are for information. Some of them are for action. I chair a joint collaboration activity on IMT 2020. And that liaison just came in this morning. So if there's any group that has work that they're doing associated with 5G or the transport of 5G, those are the types of things that we would like you to send back to the ITU so we can keep a database of all the work that's going on, mainly so that we can avoid duplication of work. If the ITUT knows that work is going on in a particular area, they don't have to start it all over again, right? So go to the next slide, just real quick. So there's another slide of liaisons. There is, actually this isn't the newest, well, that's fine. So there's a whole bunch of drafts on trust and quantum. So if you like trust, if you like quantum, the ITUT Study Group 13 meeting just happened the first 2 weeks of July. They produced quite a bit of work. These are some recent drafts. So the next slide. I'm going to do this. And then so the activities, there are joint collaboration activities and focus groups and correspondence groups and roadmap style work. So if you don't know what those things are, you can come and talk to me. But the groups that are very active in Study Group 13 right now are identity management, autonomous networks, machine learning data sets. This is a new correspondence group that's been created so that you can discuss how to standardize the transfer of data set information when you're dealing with machine learning. Next slide. Whole slew of new work. As an eye chart, this is just Study Group 13. There are 11 study groups in ITUT. There's a lot to look at. This is the newest work in Study Group 13. Study Group 20 is going on this week. In a couple weeks, Study Group 17, which is security, is going on. And then Study Group 15, which is transport related, is going on in September. Lots of stuff going on. You can see that. These are the joint collaboration agreement links. If you're interested in any of these, you can click on them and see what their latest work is. Next slide. This is the information about quantum information technology for networks. These are the deliverables that they've already sent out. So if you're interested in that, you might want to take a look at that. Next. Now, from a geopolitical standpoint and from an organization standpoint from ITUT, there are some humongous meetings that have been going on. Because of COVID, these meetings were supposed to take place in 2020 and 2021 and 2022. Well, the meeting that was supposed to take place in 2020 happened a couple months ago, and it was called WTSA. This is the one that organizes the work for the ITUT. And so there's some hot topics there, what happened and some of the stuff that occurred. If you're interested in the resolutions or opinions or any of the proceedings, you can click on it and look at it there. Go to the next slide. WTDC was supposed to take place last year. These are the things that were the hottest topics of discussion and debate during the WTDC. WTDC is for ITU-D. It's the development sector. It's to help connectivity across the world. So you can see what happened there. Go next. Upcoming is the plenipotentiary meeting. Sounds very heavyweight. Actually, what it is it's the one that elects the new Secretary General of the ITU. So this is a big deal. This meeting happens, it's 3 weeks. It's in Bucharest, sorry. And the topics of this are internet governance is a huge topic. If you care about policy, if you want to see what some of the stuff going on in the world, you can look at that link. There's the AI is going to be a big topic, things about Open RAN and open standards and open stuff. There'll be more discussions about that and high-level resolutions coming down. The important thing that may be lost on some people is the plenipotentiary is a treaty-binding meeting, which means laws can come out of this thing. It's something that matters to member states. So if you go to the next. Upcoming meetings, I've already said those. That's it. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, look up the slides if you have any questions. Follow the link or talk to Scott. I think that's the easiest way.
So we're going to have a talk from Yari about data minimization. Given that we're running a little bit behind on the schedule, we're going to ask you to take questions on this talk to the list, and we're not going to do them live right now. And I'd like to remember folks to please wear their masks properly over their nose and mouth in the session.
Except here, right?
No, not here, like during reception.
Thank you. So I'll try to be brief. There's more to discuss, but let's do that on the list. So this is one of the drafts that has been inspired by the Model T work, by the way, and there's more, but this is one that we're discussing today. And I actually believe that this is potentially useful for the IAT to adopt as an IAB document and eventually an RFC. And that's why it's sort of, I'm asking the IAB to adopt it and talking about it here. Next slide, please. So the context for this is that the IAB typically doesn't deal with detailed protocol issues. It deals with broader topics like trends in the internet or some high-level guidance. For instance, RFC 8546, which talks about protocol wire images and how they eventually get used. If you have any information there, somebody will end up using it. And our question was in the Model T if there's any guidance to give with respect to data we share about users. And of course, increased encryption will make less parties privy to the information about users because you encrypt information flows, but you still provide a lot of information to various servers and services, and maybe that's too much, and these services can also share the information further, either by accident or through commercial reasons. What can we say about this? It's a hard problem, but maybe there are some things to say. Next slide, please. So we came up with this simple thing. It's just called the data minimization principle. And we're trying to use the principle of least privilege and sort of set it in the protocol context. Just reading out loud that protocol participants should minimize the information they share. For instance, they should provide only the information to each other that is necessary for the function that they expect to be performed by the other party. And if they share more information than that, then basically this wire image thing applies, that information will get used even at the servers, even if you encrypted the whole TCP flow or quick flow. So it's pretty simple, but perhaps needs to be said given that we are sharing so much data. Next slide. So you may ask, how does it actually get translated to real technical works? 3 examples, and there's probably more. We can think of new places to apply this. Oblivious DNS, oblivious HTTPS. Basically, they avoid giving full information to any single participant. So that's the clue there. Privacy-preserving measurements, the PPM working group, avoid giving a single user's data to any party, but still be able to provide aggregate statistics, for instance. And then end-to-end message encryption between users, so that you may use some relays, servers that relay information, but you don't tell the servers the content of the messages, but just the destination where they want to be relayed. So pretty simple stuff, but actually important because we are sharing way too much information in the internet today. So that's it, and we're out of time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jari. And so if anyone has comments or questions, please send them on the Architecture Discuss mailing list. All right. Dr. Cabral, thanks so much for coming over to give an invited talk. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so we invited Dr. Cabral. He is a professor of economics and international business at the University of New York. So it was a short drive, but it was quite spontaneously. So really happy to have you here. And we invited you because of the EU Digital Market Act, which was just finished, I think, right, very recently. And this already triggered some discussion in the IETF. There was the Mimi Barbov yesterday evening, and there was a lot of discussion there already. And so we are really happy to have you here as an expert. And I can just encourage everybody to take the opportunity to ask any questions they have now during the session. We have 25 minutes left, so let's see how far we get. But also after the session, you will be around for a little bit longer. So yeah,
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me, and I'll try to be brief. So again, next slide, if you could move. I was going to just very briefly introduce myself because I'm not by any means an expert in internet infrastructure. So to be very clear, my area of expertise is the study of competition policy, and there's a lot of it over the internet. And so there are a lot of things that may be relevant for you. That's the reason primarily why I'm here. In particular, I co-wrote a report to the European Union in preparation of the Digital Markets Act, which was approved Monday of last week. So this is all very fresh. So next slide, please. I'm sorry if I'm just starting from the zero, but basically, as I said, I don't know anything about infrastructure, and I'm primarily talking about commerce over the internet. So issues of IP, of competition, and so forth. Those are the issues that I deal with. And those are the issues that the Digital Markets Act and also the Digital Services Act, which is the next one that's coming up, address, and which I think are relevant also for people dealing with infrastructure. So next slide, please. Now, being so ignorant of issues of infrastructure, I decided it might not be a bad idea for me not to assume any knowledge on your part on issues of competition policy. So apologies if I'm stating the obvious to some of you, but I'm going to start with, Antitrust 101. What is this all about? By the way, if you're not in North America, this is usually known as competition policy, but it's essentially the same thing. It's, a set of institutions and laws that govern the way commerce is done, not just on the internet, but more generally, okay? Some key players might be the Antitrust Division of the US Department of Justice, or in Europe, DG Comp, the Directorate of Competition, which is probably the most powerful directorate in the European Union. And then there's a whole set of laws. One thing that's a bit peculiar of competition policy, and this may sound a little strange to you, and if it does, it is because it's strange, is jurisdiction. So strictly speaking, in practice, I should say, every competition authority in any country in the world has jurisdiction over pretty much every firm in the world. It sounds a little strange, but it's true. So just a few months ago, the United Kingdom blocked the acquisition of Giphy by Meta. So we have an acquisition of 2 American firms, and that acquisition was blocked by a United Kingdom regulator. How come? How did you find that jurisdiction? Well, to the extent that Meta and Giphy want to do business in the UK, they have to follow their rules. If they say you cannot do that acquisition and they cannot afford not to do business in the United Kingdom, then they have to follow whatever is imposed on them. So this is somewhat, it's very different from what we find in these meetings, and because it's not so much about global cooperation, it's very fragmented. Next slide, please. Just again, 3 minutes for those of you who are not aware of, competition policy has evolved a lot in the past 30 years. In particular, one thing that we've noticed is what my colleague Thomas Philippon refers to as the Great Reversal. It used to be primarily a US-based tradition of being very tough on how firms compete and so forth, whereas Europe did not have a lot of that. And in the past 30 years, there was a complete reversal between the two sides of the Atlantic. And now it's the European Union that's been really the leader in trying to enforce rules for level play field in commerce in general, and in particular on the internet. And I think this is particularly important when it comes to digital markets. And that's sort of when I finally am coming to, next slide please, my point, which is the Digital Markets Act. This is all very fresh. As I said, it was approved on Monday of last week. So we're just living through it right now. And the goal is to restore some level of competition in digital markets. And what I mean by that is, the usual suspects, Google and Apple and Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, and then maybe other smaller platforms, which are referred to in DMA as the gatekeepers. And I think if I had to divide the structure of the DMA, I would say there are 3 parts that are important to it. One is defining who are these gatekeepers, because we have first to say who are they who are going to be regulated. Second, the list of do's and don'ts, and I want to talk a little bit about that. And finally, how does this work in practice? How do you implement this? One thing is to have a law in theory. The other thing is how this is going to work in practice. So what I want to do in the next 3 slides or so is to go over these different parts in greater detail. So gatekeepers, there's a bunch of articles that define that. And I'm just giving you just a little bit of the tip of the iceberg. It's basically, as I said, the usual suspects, and basically come up with rules that would essentially include them. So you have to be large, you have to be have entrenched power, in other words, have dominated the market for quite some time, and you have to have a core platform service. So it could be Google search engine, it could be social networks on Facebook and so forth. And there's an Article 15.1, that says that the European Commission will conduct market investigation to decide whether a certain corporation should be or should not be included as a gatekeeper and therefore subject to the regulations in the DMA. Next slide, please. And the core of the DMA, and this is probably what you should probably pay attention to, everyone should be, is Chapter 3, which is a list of do's and don'ts. Let me just say that, I mean, if you ask me, does this have the potential for being a big deal? And my answer is no. This has the potential of being a humongous deal. I mean, this really could be a watershed moment in the history of the internet. Maybe I'm exaggerating, and perhaps, of course, you guys have a different perspective, which is infrastructure. But in terms of the history of how Google and Microsoft and Facebook and so forth have been doing business, I think could change radically in the next few years if this is really implemented. Okay, so it's Articles 5 and 6. There's a typo in there. They basically have, if I were to summarize Article 5, things that you really have to do or cannot do, and then things that maybe upon further investigation we may tell you not to do. And let me now, the next slide, please, give you some examples of what those things might be, just to give you an idea how revolutionary this could be if this is actually implemented. No self-preferencing in ranking and in indexing. So, for example, I mean, of course, there are allegations, we don't know, that Amazon would favor its own products in listing them on the pages. Or that Google, there is some evidence of that, would bring some of the affiliated services up on the organic search pages and so forth. That's in the blacklist, okay? Second, huge, this one. FRAND, which is the legal term for fair and non-discriminatory access to click and query data. This is huge. Basically saying that Google has to provide click and query data, or Amazon, whatever, to third parties at a reasonable price. Of course, what does reasonable mean? You know, I don't know. This for lawyers to decide largely. But I mean, nevertheless, this is an important, very important step. Interoperability, there's a lot of instances where I think it will be important. One of them that's dealt with in DMA is for example, for messaging services. So I may, if I have the Cabral Messenger, I may ask Facebook to allow me to integrate it with their own messenger. Now, of course, the devil is going to be in the details, how that's going to be done. But at least the idea is that this should be important. Same thing for app stores, which are basically a huge monopoly by Apple and Google right now. No restrictions on transactions off the platform. This is getting a little technical, but for example, Amazon does not allow sellers who sell through Amazon to set a lower price elsewhere. Sounds a little crazy. It is crazy, but it is true. It's one thing that they ask. And then data portability. If I create now a Cabral selling network, I can tell Amazon that if Amir, for example, she had an account on Amazon, I want Amazon to give me that data of her past purchases so that she can have all of that, recommendations that she had on Amazon, I can have on my own Cabral platform. Again, no precedence of regulations of this strength, I don't think, in the history of the internet, and that's what the DMA is asking for. And finally, notification of acquisitions. Since 2000, GAFAM, the 5 top firms, have made close to 1,000 acquisitions, and only one was blocked. That was last year, and it was Giphy, the acquisition of Giphy by Meta. So these are just some of the items that are covered in the lists of do's and don'ts that just went into effect on Monday of last week. And as I said, I mean, if this is applied, this is really a watershed in the history of the internet, as far as I can tell. Next slide, please. So non-compliance, again, this is huge. The Commission has the rights of Article 21.1 of conduct on-site inspections. I mean, I think it's pretty draconic, but it's written there. I still don't know exactly how to interpret that, but I'm interpreting the way it's in there, that I can just walk in, your firm and ask you for the data, for your emails, for everything. And basically, these basically just the implementation, they can fines up to 10% of turnover. This may not seem like a lot, but it is a lot. I mean, this could be, I don't know, in the tens of billions of dollars of fines. So that potentially this could be big. Next slide, please. And so it's on as of last week. Okay. I think this has the potential of being huge, but of course the devil is in the details. How is this going to work? And I think one very important difference with respect to the past, in the past, competition policy has been left to lawyers and some economists. And I think one of the reasons why this is very revolutionary, this is going to create an enormous demand for people like you. Because, I mean, how on earth can the European Commission know that Amazon is giving preference to its own? No, I need to have ways of I don't know, of finding out whether they are giving access, interoperability, whether they're actually sharing the right data, and so forth. I mean, there's so many ways of not following the rules. And this is not something that a lawyer can figure out. This is something that will require a lot of expertise. And this, to me, is the biggest problem. The Commission has very limited staff, and in particular, very limited technical staff. And I think this will be the biggest challenge to see whether they can actually face up to the big giants and force them to apply the rules that are being defined by the DMA. So we'll see in the next few years. And let me just say that in addition to the DMA, another big thing that's coming out is the Digital Services Act. And that covers issues like liability, free speech, and things of that sort. So non-technical issues, but nevertheless very important issues by large digital corporations. And I think, like I said, I think it's great that the European Union is taking a lead on that. Traditionally, the US was really the country where competition rules were more enforced and more likely enforced. But in the past few years, things have kind of been reversed. Regulators in the US have essentially been asleep when it comes to antitrust. And so it's probably a good thing that the European Union is taking on that role. So thank you. And I'll be happy either now or later on, perhaps I can stay here for a little longer and answer questions you might have about the DMA. Again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Can we, no, actually, yeah, well, we have questions, so stay here, don't run away. So let's see, Wes, kick us off.
Thank you very much. Very interesting talk. And I hope, that it actually comes true to some extent, that it promotes interoperability at layers higher than we typically see in the IETF these days. Everybody wants walled garden lock-ins, and, they use base HTTP and TCP and the layers that we know about. And then it sort of stops because they're trying to get vendor lock-in. What I worry about and what I'm curious about is, does the document, which I have not read, I apologize, figure out a way to avoid some of the legal loopholes, right? So you talk about, they want to mandate instant messaging, right? I could very quickly see the companies going, okay, we're no longer doing instant messaging. We're now doing something different, right? So they're always trying to keep one step ahead and get, sort of more lock-in. Is there any sort of protections of, that the list is not this fixed list that, is going to be out of date in 3 years?
So I think you're asking the right question. And I actually don't have an answer. I mean, the answer is no. It doesn't have it there. And there are a lot of loopholes. I mean, one is, for example, encryption. You could say that, well, I'm WhatsApp, and I have this technology for encryption, and if you don't have that, I'm not going to allow you to interoperate with what. I'm just giving you as a possible example. There are myriad ways, and of course, the large corporations have a lot more technical people who can do those sort of tricks. And that's, I think, the reason why I say that the devil is in the details, whether the Commission will be able to actually implement this in a way that it's practical and that prevents all sorts of loopholes and tricks that the large corporations may implement to do away with that. And one of the problems that you also point out, which I think is important, I mean, one possible downside of this is that they will just stop offering a lot of services. I mean, if that's how you want to do it, then I'll stop doing it. I don't think so. But a lot of people, of course, I mean, the large corporations are already saying that. It was part of the lobby by the large corporations. Well, if you're going to start regulating us like this, we're going to stop offering search on Google. Well, come on. Or so I don't think it's a credible threat.
I'd just like to note, you really scared me when you said companies are going to start implementing their own encryption algorithms again to get around the interoperability problem. I'm now quaking.
Hi, Stephen Farrell. Thanks again for the talk. That was good. So a related question is,
Sort of the mic,
sure,
please.
related question is how, so the defining interoperability is obviously going to take a while. From the kind of regulatory side of it, how would you see that process happening, and how long might it take, or is it just nobody knows yet?
So one thing that I did not mention is that the DMA does include the possibility, in fact, suggests that there would be a dialogue with the corporations that are considered gatekeepers so as to implement that. I mean, I think the Commission understands that they don't understand things. And so the idea is that there will be some sort of a dialogue with the gatekeepers and perhaps some interested third parties. I mean, DuckDuckGo, for example, I mean, they've been clamoring for ages that they want access to indexing and so forth. So my guess is that the Commission will call Google, listen, we need to do something about this. And then it will call DuckDuckGo as well to tell, you guys are the experts, tell us exactly what you need, and then negotiate that with them. So DMA does not have in detail exactly what this means, just creates a platform, as it were, for this to be implemented,
Okay.
largely by means of dialogue.
Great, thanks. And as a follow-up, I guess, I presume there's no mention of things like the IETF so far in those documents.
I don't know. It's a good question. I think there's a mention of third parties who will be relevant. I don't know that there's IETF is mentioned specifically. It should be, because a lot of these things are going to amount to technical interoperability details.
Hi, Philhan Baker. Great talk. I appreciate the informed discussion of this stuff. I want to ask about switching costs. See, the thing is, at the moment, we're talking about competition policy, and company A can fairly compete with company B. I don't care about the companies. I care about Alice and Bob. And Alice in one walled garden can talk to Bob in another walled garden is an improvement. But the real thing for me is Alice, who is in one walled garden, can get up anytime she chooses and move to another walled garden of her choice without losing all her friends, losing all her contacts, losing etc. So is there any sign of that sort of movement coming onto the agenda yet?
So I think that's the right question, and I think that's one of the areas where the DMA is very specific. Now, whether they can get it is a different story. But I mentioned the example of I have my Amazon account, and suppose that there's another platform that has. Amazon is obliged to provide the third party all of the search information that they use of me, all the information they have about me that would allow the third party to provide exactly the same quality of service in terms of recommender systems. That's the law. Again, the devil's in the details. I mean, I can think of 100 ways that Amazon could screw things up for the third party. And that's where I believe technical support is going to be so important. Lawyers are not going to be able to do this, or economists for that matter.
Alyssa Cooper, thank you for this talk. It's very helpful. I have two questions. My first question is about interoperability. So there's obviously many different ways that you can achieve interoperability, and standards are just one of those. And so I'm curious whether there's a sense that you have from your perspective about whether the European Commission has preferences about how this interoperability is achieved. Obviously, in this venue, we like standards a lot, and we like to do things on an internet scale. So a sort of one-to-one dialogue, with each gatekeeper where they negotiate bilaterally how they're going to achieve this interoperability is suboptimal from our perspective. And you listed out, there's a number of areas where interoperability appears to be a goal. It's very explicit with respect to messaging, voice, and video, but there's lots of other ones in there around the data sharing and the ads ecosystem and search and all of that. So I'm just curious if you can glean whether they actually would prefer to see standardized solutions to some of these things, or whether they're kind of indifferent. And then the sort of flip side of that second question is, there's my understanding of other pieces of European Union legislation where they're much more explicit about the standardization requirements, where they actually, detail them and then delegate them to the European standards organizations, or for like in the Data Act, where they talk in cloud switching about the need for standards or interfaces, and it's much more explicit, at least in my reading, than it is in the DMA. And so I'm wondering if that's meaningful, like the fact that there is no explicit language in there about standardization, whether we should read something into that as far as, whether it was put to the side because it was not viewed as a viable option, or if that was just part of the political process.
Right. Two very good questions. I mean, I'm probably going to repeat myself a little bit in here, but the DMA was created by a bunch of politicians, lawyers, and economists who know nothing about technical details. It was largely an exercise in reverse engineering, saying, here are some problems that we have. We have to deal with Apple. We have to deal with Google. What is a law that would kind of relate to that? And so in answer to your question, I don't think there are any preferences because they have no idea. Pardon my sincerity. And
Now you're on the record.
They have no idea how to do it. And honestly, I really think that this is an area where you could make an enormous contribution, because the DMA, that's the part I don't like. It's a bit of a patchwork of things, which is clearly guided by the problems that people have, not by a general theory of how it could be. But ultimately, as one of the previous questions said, I think the goal is to end with closed systems. The internet right now is a series of enclosed gardens, enclosed systems that do not allow for competition. App stores, search protocol, and so forth. And so the idea is to the best that we can, try to end that. What's the best technical way of doing that? I don't know. And I think, honestly, I think that the European Commission would be delighted to have IETF or IAB contributions in that direction. But I also think that probably depends on what type of problem you're talking about, because an app store is very different from search, which is very different from algorithm. I mean, there are different types of problems on the commercial part of the internet. I don't think there's one size fits all in terms of regulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Christian next remotely, and we are close to time. So Christian and Mallory, can you please keep it short? And I'm cutting the queue after Mallory.
Thank you for the talk. It was very interesting, and it's interesting to see that people are trying to address competition issues. I am a bit scared by what you have mentioned about sharing data. I mean, you mentioned competition as being a big issue in the internet, and it is. But there is another big issue, which is surveillance, which is the fact that companies are acquiring data about you to either sell products or even steer you towards particular goals, behaviors, and all that. And when you say, okay, now everybody can negotiate with Google or Amazon and get all the clicks of their users, that seems to me like a liberalization of surveillance. In the old days, only Amazon and Google and a couple of big guys could do that. But in this brave new world, anybody can get all the data all the time. And that seems scary.
My answer is I agree. I have to agree. I think much of what you're talking about right now will probably fall under the Digital Services Act, which is the next act, as it were, that the Commission is putting, which includes issues of surveillance, issues of monitoring free speech, issues of basically liability for users' actions and responsibility for the user's privacy. I don't know much about the Digital Services Act, but as I said, I think your question probably refers more to that. I mean, regarding the example that I gave of Amazon search data, you can think of that as in the old days of telecommunications, number portability, I mean, there's kind of similar idea. I need to have a system whereby it's very easy for me. If I want to go from a phone company to another phone company, I can do it tomorrow at a very low cost. It's the same thing when it comes, you know, if you switch a different browser, you would like to have a way that all of your bookmarks could be transferred very easily. That's the kind of thing that the DMA is asking for in here, is making it easier for the user to switch from one system to another system and to impose the obligation on the platform to provide that data. So this is not a violation of privacy. This is data that I know that Amazon has about me. And in fact, I'm glad that Amazon has about me because they make very good recommendations. But I'm sick of Amazon. I want to move to Cabral platform. And I want Amazon to give the Cabral platform all of that data so that I can have a seamless transfer of services from one platform to the other. So I don't think here it's so much. I don't think it's an issue of privacy per se. It's an issue of not allowing the firms to have proprietary rights over user level data.
Hi, everybody. Mallory Nodal at the Center for Democracy and Technology. Thanks, Professor Cabral, for coming on such short notice. It's really good to have this discussion here about the impacts. I guess my question is really straightforward, so it's short. But you know, we've seen the global data protection regulation, for example, GDPR, kind of play out for a few years now, and I think a lot of people would say there could be some changes. We've got notes for those regulators, and I wonder then about the DMA as well. I suspect that because we're already sort of anticipating problems, that some of those problems will play out. So what are the mechanisms to revise this? How long will it take? Does it have to be in the courts? Would the EC be more flexible in actually changing this? Because I believe it's a directive, not a regulation. Or maybe you could clarify on that. And you know, what kinds of evidence or advocacy would be useful in bringing you know, really big red flags to the commission if it does happen to play out in ways that we think it might, but actually then do?
Correct. I mean, another great question. Yes, you're quite right. In fact, the DMA does have provisions for it to be revised in the next few years. I mean, my guess it'll take probably a decade before the dust settles on it. And I mean, any interested party can contribute to it. I mean, in that regards, I mean, I think it's a good attitude that the European Commission have, which is one of willingness to learn and willingness to adapt as time goes by. I have to say that the other point that you raised, which I think is a very important point, is, I mean, there are risks. There are enormous risks. The GDPR, one risk was, and there's some evidence already that economists have been studying, that this had a very negative impact on small startups. Because, you know, if cookies, I mean, information about consumer data is what made many of these startups survive and thrive. And if all of a sudden you cannot do that, it creates an enormous barrier to entry for new startups. So I mean, clearly there are risks. I mean, for example, in the US, I don't know if you're aware of that, but one of the proposals Senator Warren and other people have been proposing is to have a complete moratorium or complete prohibition of acquisitions of startups by large corporations. Like I said, there's been about 1,000 since 2000. I think that would be disastrous, if you ask me, because it's an entire ecosystem that would disappear overnight. So it's important to take into account the risks that such draconian policies have. And I think that's one of the reasons why this is not set in stone. I mean, I was probably dramatizing it a little too much. The document was approved last. I think it was an important moment, Monday of last week, but this is by no means the end of the story. It will take probably a decade until things settle down, and there will be a lot of dialogue with all the interested parties and a lot of adjustment in India, various articles of the DMA. But it's a good start, I think. It's an important start.
All right. Thank you so much. We're sorry for running a little bit over time. Can I ask everyone to join me in a round of applause for Dr. Cabral? Thanks so much for coming over and for a great talk, because I've been hearing about this so many times, and now I feel like I understand a little bit more, and I'm terrified. All right, this is a wrap of the Iabopen session. We will be back in person at the next IETF, barring another pandemic. And we'll see you in the meantime on the mailing list. Thanks everyone for coming, and have a great rest of your ITF week. And if you want to ask Dr. Cabral questions, he's right there.